So this is the field where I've done my buzzard photography over the years. There's a few other fields in the area where I know there are buzzards around, but this is the only place I've ever successfully managed to get them down to rabbits so that I can photograph them. Originally the nest was in the big oak tree there, but I don't know when that was last used. Certainly I've never seen it used. You can just see the remains of the old nest. The other big advantage of this site is the ability to position a hide. Through the winter especially, the site is used by horses, and when it rains or the weather's not so good, they take shelter in amongst the trees over here, and the point where they go into the trees has battered down the grasses and cleared the branches so that there's a nice convenient spot in which you can place a hide with a view out over the grassy area. I haven't got the hide with me today, but as you get near you'll be able to see the position of the camera and get an idea of where you would be able to put the hide if you wanted to. From this angle you can get an idea of the view from the hide. Obviously these plants would be cut back just enough to allow a clear view out to where the rabbit was staked. I always put a tent peg through the back leg of the rabbit, between the tendon and the bone, just to hold it in place, because what I've found is the buzzards, certainly the adult buzzards, will come down. The first thing they try and do is pick up the buzzard and fly off with it so they can eat it at a point where they would feel safer. I'd actually been looking for the nest site here for quite a while and not been able to work out where it was. I knew we got young buzzards in the trees around the field, but I could never quite work out where they were nesting once I knew it wasn't in the oak tree. Then last year we were walking the dogs along a path that we use on a really regular basis and really stumbled across it. The reason it's difficult to find is that there's only a very small area where you can actually see the nest. Literally perhaps an area of about 3 or 4 yards by 3 yards where the nest is visible. You can stand right underneath it and have no idea that it's there due to the branches that are in between you and the nest. As you come round the corner here, if I stand in this spot, I can now see the nest up in the tree there. If I walk over here, it's now obscured by branches. If I come down here, I can just get a glimpse of the nest here, but you're right underneath it. And then if you go and stand underneath the tree, as I say, you can't actually see anything at all. You might think that there would be a lot of splatter of bird poo, but in fact there really isn't much of a clue there either. There's a little bit down on the leaves here. There's a tiny bit on the stone there. But generally, considering this is underneath a nest, and we are standing right underneath it now, there is very little indication that the buzzards are there, so they've picked a fantastic site from that point of view. As you probably gathered, the buzzards have left the nest now, just in the last few days. I did hear as I was walking over to the trees the calls, so I presume the youngster is still hanging around at the moment. which means I'll probably give it a week, but then I'll go out and see if I can find a rabbit and tempt the youngster and the adults down to have a feed. Last year they had a good year, and I did manage to get some pictures one day, so I'll go back a year from this point and show you some of the images from that day. The pattern tends to be the same each time. Obviously nothing comes down immediately, but what you'll then hear is magpies, possibly the buzzards, but certainly the magpies will start to appear in the trees round the site, start to call, and then eventually one or two braver individuals will come down. Once they've been feeding for a little bit, others join them, and then eventually the buzzards will appear and chase the magpies away. One thing I have found is that as the buzzards are feeding, I don't know whether the magpies can tell that the buzzards are perhaps starting to get towards the end of the meal, but the magpies will eventually start to come down, and particularly with the youngsters will harass them. And it's quite often noticeable that if there are a few magpies around, one of the adults will come down and reassert the dominance of the buzzards over the feeding site. It can be quite amusing to watch the youngsters glaring at the magpies, even though they don't have the confidence to chase them away.